Look, I need you to picture something real quick. Imagine you owe your neighbor money, like serious money, thousands of dollars. And instead of knocking on your door demanding payment, this neighbor keeps handing you more cash. Here, take another loan. Spend it however you want. You'd think that's insane, right? You'd think your neighbor lost their mind. But that's exactly what's happening between America and China right now. Except we're not talking thousands. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. China owns about $760 billion of American debt. That's enough money to buy every single Starbucks location on Earth and still have billions left over. And for years, politicians and news anchors have been screaming the same thing. China owns America. We're screwed. They control us. But here's what nobody's telling you. The real story is way darker, way more complicated, and honestly, way more interesting, because China doesn't own us. We don't own them. We're both locked in the same room with a bomb between us, and neither of us can leave without blowing everything up. Today, we're breaking down the twisted relationship between the world's two biggest economies. And by the end of this, you're gonna understand money and power in a way most people never will. Let's get into it. So first things first, $760 billion. That's what China holds in used treasury bonds right now. But here's the thing most people miss. That number used to be way higher. Back in 2013, China owned over $1.30 trillion of our debt. They've been selling it off for years. Slowly, quietly, and most people have no idea. In fact, Japan actually owns more US debt than China does right now. But nobody talks about that because it doesn't make a good scary headline. So why does everyone keep saying China owns America? Simple. Fear sells. Drama gets clicks. And the truth is boring compared to the story of an evil empire holding our country hostage. But the real truth? It's not about ownership. It's about survival. Both countries need each other so badly that if one collapses, the other one's going down too. Think of it like two people handcuffed together standing on the edge of a cliff. If one jumps, they're both dead. That's the US and China. Alright, let's rewind. We need to understand how China ended up with all this American debt in the first place. It starts in the 1990s and early 2000s. China's building factories everywhere. They're making t-shirts, shoes, toys, phones, everything. And Americans? We're buying it all. Here's how the cycle works. You walk into Walmart. You buy a pair of sneakers made in China for $30. That money goes to the Chinese factory owner. But here's the problem. That factory owner can't pay his workers with US dollars. He needs yuan, Chinese currency. So he takes those dollars to the Chinese government and says, hey, trade me yuan for these dollars. The government gives him yuan. Cool. But now the Chinese government is sitting on a giant pile of American dollars. And here's where it gets wild. If China just sits on those dollars or dumps them, the value of the dollar drops. And if the dollar drops, the yuan gets more valuable. And if the yuan gets expensive, those sneakers you bought for $30, now they cost $50. And if they cost $50, you stop buying them. And if you stop buying them, Chinese factories shut down. Workers lose jobs. The economy crashes. The government panics. China cannot let the yuan get expensive. Their entire economy runs on selling cheap stuff to Americans. So what do they do with all those dollars? They send them right back to America. They buy US Treasury bonds. Safe, stable, boring. And when they buy our bonds, they're basically loaning money to the US government, which keeps our interest rates low, which means you can get cheap mortgages and car loans, which means you keep spending money on Chinese products. It's a loop. A perfect self-feeding loop. We buy their stuff. They loan us money. We use that money to buy more of their stuff. Rinse and repeat. For 30 years, this system worked like clockwork. We got cheap TVs and iPhones. They got millions of jobs in a booming economy. Everybody won. Until they didn't. Before we go any further, if you're finding this breakdown valuable, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is Money Trap Channel, and every single week we break down the money games, the power moves, and the systems running the world that nobody else wants to explain. This stuff matters. And if you want to actually understand how the game works, instead of just being a player getting played, you need to be here. Alright, let's keep going. Okay, so here's the nightmare scenario everyone's scared of. What if China wakes up tomorrow and says, screw it, we're selling all our US bonds, every single one. What happens? Let's walk through it. First, US interest rates explode. Because if China's selling all their bonds, we need to find other buyers. And to attract those buyers, we have to offer higher interest rates. Way higher. Suddenly, mortgages aren't 6%, they're 10%, maybe 12%. Car loans double. Credit cards hit 30%. The average American can't afford anything anymore. And since consumer spending makes up 70% of the US economy, everything collapses. Jobs disappear. Companies go bankrupt. We're looking at a recession. Maybe worse. The dollar crashes. Everyone's panicking. It's chaos. Sounds terrible for America, right? But hold on. Because China just shot themselves in the face too. See, when they dump all those bonds, they're selling them at a massive loss. The value tanks, and any bonds they still hold, those are now worthless. They just destroyed $760 billion of their own money. And remember that loop we talked about? When the dollar crashes, the yuan skyrockets in value, which means Chinese products become expensive, which means Americans stop buying them, which means Chinese factories shut down. Millions of workers lose their jobs. The country erupts in chaos. This is what economists call mutually assured destruction. It's the same concept from the Cold War. Both sides have weapons that can destroy the other, but using those weapons destroys yourself too. So nobody pulls the trigger. China can't dump our debt without destroying their own economy. And we can't stop buying their products without destroying ours. We're stuck together, forever, or at least until one of us figures out a way to escape. So here's where it gets really interesting. China is selling US debt, not all at once, but slowly. Over the last decade, they've cut their holdings almost in half. Why? One word: Russia. In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. And the US didn't just send weapons. We dropped a financial nuke. We froze over $300 billion of Russia's money. Just locked it up. Russia couldn't touch it. China watched that happen and realized something terrifying. Holy crap. They can do that to US too. See, if China ever invades Taiwan or if tensions get bad enough, the US president can sign one piece of paper and freeze ALL of China's treasury holdings. $760 billion gone. Just like that. So China's panicking. They're thinking, we need to get out of the dollar system before it's too late. And what are they buying instead? Gold. Real, physical gold. Tons of it. Because gold doesn't exist on a computer. You can't freeze it. You can't hack it. It's real. In 2023 and 2024, China went on the biggest gold buying spree in history. They're literally swapping digital promises from America for cold, hard metal they can store in their own vaults. They're preparing for war, not a shooting war, an economic war. And they're building their bunker. But China's not just buying gold. They're doing something even smarter. They're using all that extra cash to buy the rest of the world. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative. Fancy name for a simple idea. Loan money to poor countries to build stuff. Roads, ports, power plants. Then, when those countries can't pay you back, you take the stuff. Sri Lanka borrowed billions from China to build a port. Couldn't pay it back. So China took the port for 99 years. They basically repossessed a piece of a country. Pakistan, Kenya, Ecuador, dozens of countries are drowning in Chinese debt. And when they can't pay, China doesn't send debt collectors. They take control. Ports, railroads, entire pieces of infrastructure. China's not trying to own America anymore. They're trying to own everything else. They're building a global empire that doesn't need the US dollar. They're playing the long game. And honestly, it's working. So let's wrap this up. Why does China own so much US debt? Because for 30 years, it was the perfect scam. We got cheap stuff, they got jobs and power. Everybody made money. Everybody looked the other way. But that marriage is falling apart. Fast. China's trying to escape by buying gold and building a global empire. America's trying to escape by bringing factories back home and banning Chinese tech. Both sides are packing their bags. But here's the brutal truth. Neither side can actually leave. Not yet. Because if China dumps our debt tomorrow, the global economy implodes. If we stop buying their products, their government collapses. We're handcuffed together. We hate each other. But we need each other to survive. And that's the real story. Not that China owns us. Not that we're screwed. But that we're trapped in a toxic relationship where breaking up means mutual destruction. So the next time some politician screams about China owning America, you'll know better. Nobody owns anybody. We're both just trying to survive the mess we created together. And the scary part? Nobody knows how this ends. Look, this is just the surface. There's so much more to this story. What happens when countries actually go bankrupt? Why is the US dollar still the world's reserve currency? And how long will that last? What's really going on with inflation and your money right now? That video's up next on your screen. Click it. Watch it. Because understanding this stuff isn't optional anymore. The game's being played whether you know the rules or not. And if you got value from this, drop a comment. Tell me, do you think China's gonna fully break away from the dollar? Or are we stuck in this forever? I read every single one. Until next time, stay disciplined.